Hey everybody, happy Friday. Now, it's been a long week, I'm sure, for most of us or many of us. The weekend is almost here. I thought it'd be fun to end the week with a fun story. So I'm going to tell you today about what I think probably is my biggest language learning fail. It's probably not what you expect, so make sure you stick around. Okay, so in the language learning community at large, if we just include everybody that's learning languages around the world, there is of course a very common idea that going to live in a country and be fully immersed in a place where the language you're learning is spoken is like the ultimate solution. It's a one size fits all. No matter what, you're going to learn the language, right? If you can go and live there, you should totally do it. Now, I think it's a great opportunity. I think if you have the opportunity to go live somewhere, especially if it's just a part of the natural course of life, maybe you're moving there for a job, with a spouse, or who knows what. If life just takes you somewhere, that's great. But a lot of people don't have that opportunity. And so I do see a lot of people that go to great lengths to just see if there's any way they can go and live somewhere because that's the only way they're going to learn a language. Now, many of you will know that I often talk about this thing, the immersion myth, where, the fact is that just going to live somewhere, it doesn't guarantee you're going to learn a language at all. I've met many people who've lived in a country for a long period of time and not learned the language fluently, and in many cases, barely learned the language at all. But you might be thinking, but I'm different, right? Like, I'm a language learning enthusiast. I speak a whole bunch of languages, been doing this for over 10 years, I've taught people languages, I've got a channel about languages. Like, if I went to go live somewhere as a beginner, right, like, come on, surely it'd be game over. Like, I'm gonna just kill it. No, I'm no different than anybody else. And I remember I used to always talk about how I really believed that you're better off getting a pretty decent level in a language before you actually go there. Again, if your life just takes you there and you have the opportunity, that's fine. But in terms of, actively creating opportunities for yourself to go there for the purpose of learning, I've always thought you're better off getting a pretty decent level before you do so. Because when you arrive, on the very first day, you're going to be able to take advantage of every single little thing, right? If you have a pretty decent level, you're going to be able to take advantage of all the conversations happening around you, eavesdropping, talking to the taxi driver, starting a conversation with somebody. That little extra 1 or 2 minutes you spend talking to the cashier while you're ordering food or a coffee when there's no one in line behind you. So many things, right? You can take advantage of that. When I moved to Japan, many of you will know, I actually worked as an interpreter on my very first day in the country. And so the way that I got my first practice speaking Japanese in Japan was I just asked people for directions constantly. My first day in Japan, I actually did need help, but a few times I kind of asked for directions just a second time just because I wanted to practice, because I found that people were astounded by my level of Japanese. And so while they were helping me get somewhere, they would talk to me and we would have a conversation. And sometimes we would arrive at wherever I was going, but then we would just keep talking for 10 or 15 minutes because people were so interested. And that couldn't have happened if I didn't already have a good level in Japanese. But for quite a few years, it wasn't something I'd ever done. I'd never gone somewhere as a complete beginner, right? Because I've learned almost all my languages to some level of fluency before even going to a country where the language was spoken. Except for the case of Portugal, because it was completely unplanned. I was living in France. Well, I was in France looking for a job. I wanted to live in France. I wanted to work in French, but I just couldn't find a job in France. And so many of you know this story, how I ended up getting hired last minute for a job as a French person, even though I'm British, but it was a job for French people that was a French customer service role for Expedia France, but it was in Lisbon, Portugal. And so I had never even imagined going to Portugal. It's a nice country. I just never thought about going there yet. I was living there all of a sudden in the space of like 36 hours. And so I had no Portuguese knowledge. I spoke okay Spanish. I spoke very good French. Zero Portuguese. And you might think, okay, come on. I mean, Spanish, French, like it's going to be pretty easy. It really wasn't. It was not easy at all. And all of my biggest fears about going somewhere as a complete beginner, they all came true, but many more things were true that I hadn't actually thought about. So I've talked about this on the channel before, how what I found is, the last episode on this channel, we discussed essentialism in language learning, right? And this sort of relentless pursuit of weniger aber besser in German, right? Less but better. What is the most essential thing that you can do at this moment? What are the most essential language learning activities that will contribute to your overall goals, right? Whether in the moment or the overarching goals of becoming a fluent speaker. But what I found is that those essential things are actually incredibly different when you are a beginner living in the country versus when you're comfortable at home learning a language for fun and because you want to become fluent. When I'm at home and I'm learning a language like, let's say, Portuguese, and I say I want to be a fluent Portuguese speaker, and so I start looking at, cool, what are the activities that I could do right now that are going to move me to the next level? And so the things that I do in that moment, I'm completely free to just do whatever I believe is going to help me start building that foundation to start being a fluent speaker. But when you live in Portugal and you know nothing, well, all of a sudden you need to get through your everyday life. You need to learn how to get through the line at the grocery store. How do you buy a coffee? How do you buy dinner? How do you order takeout? How do you get through the security thing in your building, in my case, because I was working in a Portuguese office where all the security guards were Portuguese, and I had a security card thing, and I had to figure out, how do I actually get through this situation? There are so many things about your daily life. So all of a sudden, the things that become most essential, they're not necessarily the things that are going to give you that amazing linguistic foundation that you might want to build to become a fluent speaker. And so what I found is that instead of doing all these sort of essential things I would normally do and sort of really getting comfortable with the basic grammatical structures, the basic rhythm of a language, and start learning some basic vocabulary and start practicing things and, wrapping my head around how to form basic sentence structures and then mixing things out and switching things, substitution drills. Instead, I just had to learn, what the heck are they saying when I'm in line at the checkout buying groceries? And I had to learn things like, would you like a bag, please? Are you paying with cash or card? Is this to go or is it for here? And again, it was very stressful. And I found that over time, what I really ended up doing was I just ended up memorizing all these sort of miniature scripts to get through daily life. And I found that that didn't actually help me much at all getting towards fluency. All it did is I became extremely efficient at getting through the grocery line and buying a coffee and having that really basic scripted small talk with the cashier or the barista. But again, because that was taking up so much of my mental bandwidth, and then I had a job, I was working in French, all my training was in French, everything was in French, I actually didn't have as much mental bandwidth and sort of just time to focus on really truly learning Portuguese. And so in closing, my biggest fail, it's that I really didn't learn that much Portuguese during my 2.5 months living in Portugal before I actually went to live in Germany. The funny thing is, I learned a hell of a lot of German while living in Portugal once I decided I was going to go live in Germany. And so I was able to arrive in Germany already having a very rudimentary fluent level in German. I say rudimentary because I was able to get through the day. I was able to buy a SIM card and set up my phone bill. I was able to bumble through the day with plenty of mistakes, but all in German. And so again, my first day in Germany, I was able to take advantage. I was able to talk to people, to listen to conversations around me and do my very best to figure things out. In Portugal, I could barely do anything. I remember getting my hair cut and it took like an hour and a half to explain in sort of broken Spanish, sort of Portuguese, what I wanted my haircut to look like. It was a nightmare. So, I don't know, I think that people are often surprised that the hardest time I had learning a language was actually going to the country. Now, again, I would have learned Portuguese just fine, right? I'm not saying that I couldn't learn Portuguese while living in the country. I'm just saying that I'm so used to being an incredibly efficient, effective learner when I'm at home or in a different place, right? Doing what I believe and know to be best for me, that I found that I was incredibly inefficient being a complete beginner living in a new country relative to when I'm in my element, becoming fluent before I actually go and visit or live there. So let me know in the comments, what have been your biggest language learning failures? Does mine surprise you? Are you surprised by my story? Do you disagree with anything? I'm really curious to know, what this evokes in your mind. But I would really love to hear about your own experiences. And other than that, I wish you a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you back here on Monday.